This video was sponsored by Blue Ocean Games and the Rising Tide Game Jam. You'll hear more about them later on in the video. Thank you very much to them. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of tired of thinking about America lately. I thought about not making that the opening line of the video for fear of dating it, but then I figured that this will probably still be true in 20 years or 30 years or however long it takes for the empire to fully collapse and most of the American populace to have to learn how to speak Mandarin and construct high-speed rail. This isn't meant as a slight to my American friends or viewers at all. I imagine you guys are sick of thinking about America, but man, as a Brit in particular, I am feeling that fatigue these past few years. We fought wars together these past few decades. We share common values of democracy and free speech, and thus British politicians take practically every opportunity they can to talk up our special relationship with America, an international friendship more just and important than any in the world, one that started with Churchill and Roosevelt and continues on to even our modern politicians. My point here is this: we have a lot of hateful figures in our media today talking up the horrors of immigration. They're on TV spouting this rhetoric that allowing anyone into our country who isn't white is degrading our values, eroding the very core of British culture. But the most significant damage that's been done to British culture in the past 100 years has surely been as a result of having our tongue so far up America's arse that we're practically speaking in unison. I am an English man. I should not know what a Totino's pizza roll is, but I do. I should not know who Tina Fey is. I should not know what Cinemax was. Doctor Who should not be funded by Disney. Black Mirror should not be exclusively on Netflix. I should be shopping at Woolworths and not eating at Wendy's. I should be in the fucking European Union. But alas, here we are. The last few years in particular have had me learning more about history and geography than I ever cared to in school, considering my place in this world. And naturally, as my job encourages me to monetize every thought I have, I began to ponder how I could make that about video games. And so I began looking into how my homeland of the British Isles has been represented in this chaotic, overwhelming medium. The answer, as it turns out, is almost always just as London, but we'll get to that. I first want to say this: I recognise that as an Englishman, I am not exactly exotic. In a sense, I would love to be speaking to you as a Lithuanian or a Croatian, and I could wow you with a bunch of insight into a rich, fascinating culture that is rarely talked about on the internet or represented in media in such a way. I recognise that if YouTube had been around about 150 years ago, someone could very realistically have opened up a similar YouTube video to this one saying, I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of tired of thinking about Britain lately. And they'd be well within their rights to. We were the dominant global power before America. We are watching the slow diminishing of their soft power and hegemonic influence right now, thinking, first time. We are also a country that even now you probably know and hear about more than most others in the world. You may be sick of hearing about fish and chips and the king and queen already. Trust me, I am too. Can you believe that we still have a monarchy? I mean, we're told that we gotta keep them around because they're good for tourism, but France get more tourists than us every year. You know what they did to their monarchy? Just saying. Maybe we should give that a try. I also want to say that this video is called Depictions of Britain in Video Games, when realistically it is Depictions of England in Video Games. One thing is that most Americans, who make up a hefty majority of basically any Westerner's YouTube viewer base and who do not know the difference between England, Britain and the United Kingdom, which to be fair is an awkward thing to get used to, would be less likely to click on a video called Depictions of England in Video Games because England by itself appears comparably more dull and less glamorous. And another thing is that there are very few depictions of Wales, Scotland and Ireland in video games by comparison. The few that attempt it do not tend to do a very good job at it. I'll let this clip of the Irish accents in Starfield speak for itself.
Is that how I come off now? Work's getting to me, I suppose. It's just... You see, no one on this bloody planet seems to follow basic safety precautions. It's always, Dr. Flynn, reattach me arm, or help me with this frostbite. Well, maybe if you took the time to properly dress yourself for the outside, you wouldn't be losing your fingers, you idiot. Sorry for the rant, just for a change, I'd rather be treating a common cold, and not some horrific yet entirely preventable accident.
So before I go ahead and shaft them for the rest of this video, I want to give a quick shout out to the game Judero, a truly authentically Scottish video game that I have not played myself but has gotten very good reviews and has this astonishing handmade art style. It's apparently pretty fucking out there, and I think that's cool. You'd surely be hard pressed to find a more pure depiction of this culture in this medium than this. Scotland, I think you're very cool. If you ever gain independence from us, I would like to live in you, and I hope you will accept me. But despite everything I have just said, I am English, and I make videos about video games, and thus this video is the natural endpoint of my recent fascination with my own culture and history, privileged in the grand scheme of things as it may be. This is a video about depictions of Britain in video games, and the best comfort I think it can offer you is that you won't have to think about the rest of the world right now. In this video, I want to look at some video games that don't just literally depict Britain, but are also clearly inspired by it. It is inevitable that I will miss some, even some pretty significant ones, but I put together a list of stuff that I think will make for a pretty interesting video. Just recently I found myself in the beautiful university city of Cambridge to get my PC looked at. I told the guy fixing her up that I was working on a video about depictions of Britain in video games, and was talking about various examples, and he said, "What about RuneScape?" which piqued my interest. He pointed out to me that the game's starting area of Lumbridge is named as such because of the River Lum that runs through it, mirroring the real-life city of Cambridge, which gets its name from the River Cam that also runs through it. The influence seems especially obvious when you consider that Jagex, the team behind RuneScape, are literally based out of Cambridge. Though I haven't played RuneScape, the guy also assured me that it is clearly inspired in a lot of places by typical medieval English tropes and myths and legends. It was just cool to see a city like Cambridge get a nod in a video game. As you'll soon see, anything outside of our nation's capital is quite rare indeed. On that note, the city of London of course got a track in Mario Kart Tour, and by extension Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in the form of London Loop. The track by all accounts is not very good, but it's a fine enough interpretation of the city, I guess. I suppose the chain chomp is representative of the prices. What I do really appreciate about this track is the track. The music one. I've seen quite a lot of people confused by the hard rock jam that plays on London Loop, but it's actually very fitting given the British invasion. The music one. The one in the 1960s where the Beatles and the Rolling Stones blew up in America, when Brit rock at large took the US by storm. It'd be easy, even a bit lazy, to give us some elegant, old-timey sounding song, even one at a faster pace, so I enjoy that the music for London Loop acknowledges Britain's strong history of rock music, something that will surely come up again later in the video. I also want to touch on Banjo-Kazooie, which were of course games made by Rareware, a British studio. The Banjo-Kazooie games are games that are incredibly British in ways that I'd find kind of hard to articulate. Like, I think I've got pretty good justification for almost every other game I cite having clear British influence in this video, but I admit for this one, it is mostly just vibes. Like, if I didn't know where the team who made this game were from, and you asked me after I'd finished, I still think I'd say Britain. I mean, there's small things like Banjo at one point saying core, as in core blimey, which, yes, I'm afraid is a real expression still used among some people, and Mumbo's chant being "ooh, me knackers" just sped up, which is not a real expression still used among some people. I don't think it ever was. Maybe knackers is more a northern thing? I kind of just think that's what like 3 people at Rareware called their balls. More so than anything, I think it's just the sense of humour, the irreverentness, the tongue-in-cheek wink at the camera nature of it all. Banjo is more crude and takes itself far less seriously than its contemporaries, and I think there is something inherently British about that. I'd say we as a people are up there with Japan in terms of slapstick humour, being able to just laugh at ourselves, and I love that about us. There is also, of course, the very fairy tale leanings in the story of an evil witch wanting to steal a young girl's beauty, as well as in the game's various environments and levels. I'm thinking of Bubble Gloop Swamp, click-clock wood. It all feels taken right out of an old English storybook or fable, which will eventually be adapted into a Disney animation that overshadows the original story and causes everyone to think that said story was always American since its inception. At a glance, and without doing too much in-depth research, it looks like Ubisoft are the non-English dev team who have put out the most games based on Britain, between Zombie U, Watch Dogs Legion, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This tracks as they are a French company who naturally want to depict English people being killed as much as possible, but it's notable that 3 out of 4 of these games are set in London, and Valhalla is set in a time before London as we know it existed and Vikings roamed the land. It's a good insight to the somewhat myopic lens England is viewed in. People really do think England and even Britain are just like London and that's it. Tourists really come to Britain, go to London and kind of just think they've done it all. The thing is that London is not only an impossibly huge city, but it's also a true melting pot. One of the most ethnically and culturally diverse cities in the world. For the avoidance of any doubt, I think that's cool. I take genuine pride in how diverse and socially accepting London is, but it means that you can't really put the city in a box, in the way that I don't really think you can put any city of that size in a box. It is, in the best way possible, chaotic and totally overwhelming. Hard to ever really nail down. I just know it's not an uncommon thing for American tourists, particularly those who have spent a lot of time in New York, to come to London and perhaps feel a little underwhelmed, not experiencing that European culture shock they were hoping for. That's because London and New York are actually very similar cities, the main difference really being the accents. If you want a quintessentially English experience, I think London is just too big and too all over the place to give you that. That's my advice for would-be tourists or those seeking refuge from America, I guess. If you want that holy shit I'm in England feel, one of our cooler, smaller cities like York or Bath would probably give you that feel, or like the Cotswolds or something. That doesn't really appeal to me personally yet. Maybe when I'm like 60. Anyway, I'm kind of over depictions of London. In this video, I want to talk about depictions of Britain, not depictions of what people who don't live here think it is. The depictions of London in Zombie U and Watch Dogs Legion are very cool and very accurate, but those games, Zombie U in particular, have been talked about at length in so many other YouTube videos that I'm not going to talk about these games, because if I do too many London games, I'm just going to end up repeating myself, and because you cannot make me devote brain power to more than one Ubisoft game at a time. With this in mind, though it is set in London, I do think Assassin's Creed Syndicate has the most interesting things going on under the hood, and the most relevant to the kind of thing I'm looking for. So let's start there. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is set in London, but crucially it's set in 1868, to the backdrop of the Second Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution began in England. Specifically, it's agreed to have had its genesis around the Midlands and near the north, in places like Derby and Manchester. Manchester going on to be crowned the world's first industrial city. It then spread to the rest of the country and eventually much of the continent like wildfire, but it did so most prevalently in the Midlands of England. Parts of the West Midlands are now literally known as the Black Country because of the thick clouds of smoke and soot that would fill the air from forges and ironworks, so industrialised was this region. Not to say that London wasn't industrialised, I mean far from it. It was one of the biggest and most powerful cities in the world. Of course it became a huge epicentre of industry, but if you wanted to authentically represent the Industrial Revolution in its heyday, perhaps a city like Manchester or Birmingham could have made for a more fitting location. Maybe I'm just saying this because I would have been more interested in seeing a big budget AAA games take on these cities, and because outside of European RPGs like Baldur's Gate 3 and The Witcher 3 and a couple people in Xenoblade and Metaphor ReFantazio, you really don't hear Northern English accents in video games very often, and I think they're deserving of more representation. I don't think that about Birmingham. If you went with Birmingham as a setting, you could have just left the accent out, honestly. I don't even think Americans deserve to be exposed to that. Now, I'm no historian, but I'm inclined to believe that Assassin's Creed Syndicate's interpretation of Victorian London is great, very geographically, architecturally, and culturally accurate. Though I know it's a common complaint that Syndicate's tone is too light and comedic for a game set in such a place, and I'm liable to agree. Just looking at gameplay footage, it looks like this place is a bit too bright and peppy to be Victorian London. London at this time was kind of fucking gross, polluted, covered in horse manure. It was literally known as the Big Smoke, a moniker that would eventually be taken up by My Friday Nights. Despite a bunch of lame one-liners and entirely too many guest appearances from The Sun, I'm a big fan of how the assassin hideout in this game is not a fancy building or complex like most other Assassin's Creed games, but in fact a train. A smart nod to England's early innovations in railways. The steam engine was invented here, don't you know? Trains were kind of our thing. Well, that and child labour. Syndicate, as Assassin's Creed often does, features lots of real-life historical figures, and I'm not going to go over them all, but one I think is particularly interesting is the inclusion of Dalip Singh, the real-life last Maharaja of the Sikh Empire who was forced to renounce his titles and exiled to Britain after the British East India Company moved in. For those not aware, we colonised the shit out of India. We considered it the jewel in our colonial crown. It's for that reason that there's tons of Indian and Pakistani culture, particularly food, in England today, and thank God for it. The meme often goes that we conquered the world for spices and used none of them, but those boys never forgot how to grill. You would be forgiven for assuming that Britain's national dish is fish and chips, but it's not. It's chicken tikka masala, invented by a Pakistani-Scottish chef called Ali Ahmed Aslam in Glasgow in the 1970s. Often, Indian food, like tikka masala, is intentionally made more mild than it would be back in India to suit the British palate. I'm more partial to a biryani myself. I would wager, without having ever been there, that there is about as much, if not more, Indian restaurants per square mile in England than there are Mexican restaurants in America, and you guys are neighbours. To my Indian and Pakistani friends, I say thank you for the blessed gifts that are naan bread and biryani. Sorry for all the evil shit. I enjoy the inclusion of Dalip Singh in this game because it is a direct acknowledgement of a facet of our culture that is largely unknown by those abroad and that is largely ignored by those most repugnant of us on these isles. The ones who revere the British Empire and refuse to acknowledge that we were actually maybe the most evil country in the world for like a good long while there. In the game specifically, Singh is seeking to lobby the British government for India's independence and has a complicated relationship with the government and the Queen. It all reflects real life. She was a symbol of his people's oppression, and yet she loved their culture and their land. She was godmother to some of his children. It's fascinating stuff. In the game, you even attempt to procure the legendary Kohinoor diamond, a real, incalculably valuable diamond that once belonged to Indian royalty, and then we kind of went yoink, and now we consider it the jewel in our colonial crown. I mean, literally, it's a jewel in a crown. Here's more footage of a guillotine. The antagonistic gang in Syndicate are known as the Blighters, which I choose to believe is not a coincidence and is a reference to Blighty, or Old Blighty, a nickname British people often use for Britain. Well, old people anyway. No one says that anymore, and good, because I hate the way it sounds. And I was personally shocked to find that whilst Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli is in this game, the main villain is actually some made-up guy instead. Look, I don't know or care much about Assassin's Creed, but I thought the whole idea was that the assassins are fighting against oppression throughout time or whatnot. That is the idea, right? Because in this game, you literally save Benjamin Disraeli's life. Bro, if you want to fight oppression, the man credited with creating the modern Conservative Party, a man quoted as saying, "Race is everything," and believing an actual racial hierarchy and superiority is right there. If the assassins were serious about fighting off evil, they would have gutted Benjamin Disraeli like a fish right there and then. Let's make like his mortal coil did and move on. Finally, refreshingly, we're out of London. Forza Horizon 4, made by Playground Games, a British team, is set across England and, mercifully, Scotland. Yes, they made it into a video game without having to voice dwarves. Usually a game like this is very unlike me, but I actually went out of my way to play it as research in the lead up to this video, and I've got to say, this shit's actually kind of good, man, I'm not gonna lie. Forza Horizon is a lot about the scenery and the vibes. Prior to this, Horizon had been set in Italy, France, Australia, and now it made its way to a truncated version of England and Scotland. Notable real-life locations implemented in this game include the Cotswolds, the Lake District, the city of Edinburgh, the Scottish Highlands, and that one aqueduct from Harry Potter, which you will actually race a train across at one point in this game, and it's very cool. Now, we in Britain are not exactly known for our beautiful cities. When people, particularly outside of Britain, think of other European countries, they can usually name like 3 or 4 cities in their head that they know to evoke high fantasy, fairy tale imagery. When people think of Italy, they think of Venice and Florence and Rome. When people think of France, they think of Paris and Lyon and Nice. When people think of Britain, they go, London? And then they've never heard of anywhere else. Now there's a reason for this. It's called the Luftwaffe. Okay, it's really because of poor post-war reconstruction decisions and brutalist architecture, but that didn't land quite as well as a punchline. This is not to say that we don't have beautiful cities. Bath has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since the 80s, and I remember hearing jokes about how it should be banned from the annual Britain in Bloom competition because it's literally just unfair to include it. I used to think this city was really lame because what the fuck kind of a name is Bath for a city? And then I learned that it's because it has an immaculately preserved ancient Roman bath in the center of it, and now I think it's cool actually. I think it's cool to just be named after a thing that you have. I remember seeing a Reddit comment from a woman saying that Bath is how she expected Paris to look, which is possibly setting expectations too high for anyone who plans to go there, but still, I guess this gives you an idea. But on account of the fact that it was not feasible to rebuild it all as a featureless concrete block, Britain is more well known for its countryside, which is staggeringly beautiful even when held up to its European peers, in my opinion. As such, Britain was largely chosen for Forza Horizon 4 as a chance to flex that incredible countryside. There is precisely one city in the entirety of this game's world map, and it's the Scottish capital of Edinburgh. I can say with certainty, without having even been to Edinburgh, this is the correct choice if you can only have one city in the game. Edinburgh is just about the only city in Britain that could knock the likes of Bath and Chester off their perches as the usual suspects of cities in Britain that actually look nice. It is widely regarded as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. The architecture is so consistent, complementary and well preserved, and the nearby topography allows for some truly insane views. I've never even seen it in person, and I think the Balmoral Hotel, which yes, you can see in Forza Horizon 4 because this interpretation of Edinburgh is supposedly painstakingly accurate, is maybe my favourite building in the world. It's like Big Ben's humbler, cooler little goth cousin. Edinburgh was also the correct choice because not even the medium of video games can provide the suspension of disbelief necessary to imagine that driving through London would ever be even remotely feasible. But back to the countryside. I remember watching a video of a Japanese man who'd moved to England talking about what he loved about the country, and one of the first things he mentioned was the countryside. He talked about how Japan had great countryside too, but Japan has mountains, and so being out in the country felt totally different there than it does here. To put it simply, England does not have mountains, and Scotland does. This is why blending both England and Scotland into the map is such an intelligent choice, because it allows the designers to squeeze the best of both worlds into Forza Horizon 4's world. Mountains, of course, provide dramatic views from every angle, a sense of peaceful isolation, like you're being blissfully closed off from the chaos of the rest of the world. But as England's countryside proves, a lack of mountains can also provide a unique charm. The term rolling hills gets thrown around a lot in romantic descriptions of pastoral landscapes, but England's hills really do roll. With no mountains to block them, from the right vantage point, you can see England's hills and dales stretch out for miles. Genuinely, it feels like you can see half the country from even a slightly high place. Just this ocean of green and yellow waves unfurling across the island like some kind of grand floral carpet. I don't get patriotic very often, and maybe I'm just getting old, but the English countryside's starting to do something to me, man. And I'm not just referring to hay fever, though it does definitely also do that. England's tallest peak stands at a height of less less than 1,000 meters. A few pints in, a Scottish person could eat that. A Scottish person could wake up after a night out on a mountain taller than that. The Scottish Highlands are in many ways the antithesis to the British countryside. Tall, bullish spires stretching out to dominate the skyline everywhere you look. Rugged arches and perilous hikes challenging you to even think about traversing them. Yet, despite this, perhaps even because of it, the Scottish Highlands are widely considered to be as, if not more, awe-inspiring than the English countryside. Forza Horizon 4 presents Britain at its most idyllic. It takes all the best pieces of Britain that come to mind when you think of the country and paints a beautiful yet precise tapestry with them. By taking the incredible capital and jagged tablelands of Scotland as well as the sprawling meadows and quaint beaches of England, it's able to have its cake and eat it. Multiple times, by the way, I've heard people surprised that England has beaches. Like, they didn't know we had Of course we have beaches, dipshit. They came free with our island nation. Forza Horizon 4's piece de resistance of Britishness ironically comes right at the start, I would argue, in the form of the list of selectable player nicknames. Names like Crumpet and Prime Minister and Geezer. That last one being kind of weird because, like, yeah, we do say it like that, but I have never in my life seen another British person spell it like that. You guys at Playground definitely are British, right? Because if it were me picking these, I'd even take out the A and just leave it as Geese, which in my experience is far more common. You are truly not British if you've never had someone come up to you and say, like geese. Anyway, our slang and colloquialisms will get this video to over an hour if I get carried away, so on to the next. On to the next incredible undiscovered indie game, that is, because this video is sponsored by Blue Ocean Games and the Rising Tide Game Jam they're hosting all throughout the month of May. With this game jam, the folks over at Blue Ocean are looking to fund winning teams with up to $300,000 to make their games a reality. Literally anyone from anywhere in the world is eligible to enter. This thing's gonna have it all. Games, jam, okay, probably won't have jam, but it will have games. And the games may have jam in them. I don't know, it's going to be crazy like that. You can find more details on the Rising Tide Game Jam and how to enter your indie game into the competition over on Blue Ocean's website at blueoceangames.com/challenge, which will be linked in the description. The window to enter is open from now through to May 31st, so don't miss your chance to be the next big thing. I've talked about these games quite a lot in previous videos, so I won't spend too long in this section, but I do want to say that while I think that Pokemon Sword and Shield are bad games, a lot of their little references do delight me as a Brit, particularly as pertains to Pokemon designs and in-game locations. There's so many Pokemon designs that reference Britain in some way, so I'll just speed through some of my favourites. Yamper is modelled after a corgi, which were known for being some of the favourite pets of Queen Elizabeth II. The Colossal line is a nod to our Industrial Revolution, as are Galar's mines. Obstagoon, I believe, is meant to evoke our punk history, with British bands like the Sex Pistols and the Clash helping bring the genre to the fore in the West, though to be fair he also definitely has some very real Gene Simmons energy. And Mr. Rhyme is literally just Charlie Chaplin as a Pokemon. His ability, Screen Cleaner, is even a reference to one of Charlie Chaplin's most famous routines. As far as locations go, Wyndon is very obviously London, but there's a lot of other neat stuff too. While we do not have desert cities like Stow-on-Side, that naming convention is very British, mimicking real-life places like Southend-on-Sea, Stoke-on-Trent, Bradford-upon-Avon, and many others. Balonlea, the fairy tale forest city right next to it, also brings to mind Britain's rich history with fables and fairy tales, the likes of Goldilocks and the Three Bears and Jack and the Beanstalk having their origins here. Motorstoke is maybe my favourite. It's one of the rare instances of a video game even so much as alluding to the existence of Manchester, because make no mistake, that's what this place is mirroring. The red brick buildings, the industrial aesthetics and machinery. It's just cool to see one of England's big cities that isn't London actually depicted in a piece of media. It's also one of the earlier cities you come across, and considering Galar's map is basically just Britain flipped upside down, it even makes locational sense because you spend most of the game heading north from the south, and Manchester in real life is a northern city. Oh, and Circhester is obviously based on Bath. I actually can't believe I didn't pick up on this at first. I had a YouTube comment point this out to me in my video on rewriting Sword and Shield, and I felt so dumb for not noticing it. But yeah, it's literally the city with a bath in it, so Jesus Christ. As an aside, the Industrial Revolution is why the steampunk aesthetic has so many top hats and bowler hats, by the way, because it started in England, and that was our style at the time. We also have tons of clock towers. We're probably the clock tower capital of the world, and that's another area where you can see British influence on steampunk. Almost every big city depicted in steampunk media takes more influence, I'd argue, from the likes of London and Birmingham and Manchester than anywhere else. My favourite depictions of Britain in media tend to be the ones that go the steampunk route. Honestly, I think it's one of the most accurate and insightful ways you can choose to represent England, apart from extreme pretentious evil, which also fair enough. Confession time. I don't think Big Ben, or the Elizabeth Tower, is the coolest clock tower in Britain. I think the one in the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh is the coolest, and I also like Old Joe in Birmingham more. Big Ben's cool, but it's a little bit gaudy, a little ostentatious for me. Our clock towers are one of the things that give me the most national pride. I think they're like one of the coolest things about us that like not even other European countries have, at least not to the extent we do. Clock towers are so fucking cool, and we have the best. Finally, I want to give some flowers to the music of Sword and Shield. The music for the city of Hammerlock, for example, is perfect for a fancy, presumably old English inspired city that I think has taken a lot of cues from the likes of York and Oxford and Cambridge. I'm not exactly sure what that main instrument is. Sounds like a harpsichord to me, but whatever it is, that is the one. That is the one that plays whenever a piece of media is doing a Britain thing. France get the accordions, we get whatever that is. The accordions are slightly cooler, to be fair. At the same time, there's an incredible juxtaposition because Sword and Shield also feature a ton of the rockiest music in the series, like Marnie's theme, which again feels like an acknowledgement of Britain's deep legacy of punk and rock music, especially given Marnie and Team Yell's aesthetic. And I'm a huge fan of the bagpipes and the Wild Area music. The Wild Area definitely appears to be a mix of the English Lake District and the Scottish wilderness more so than anything. I mean, viaducts, Great Lakes, completely insane weather. And something, this is a completely random thing, something that always stuck out to me about Sword and Shield is the policeman trainer class. I struggle to put it into words, but I'm like, that is one of the single most British things in the entire game to me, is the way the policeman looks. Like, yep, I feel like that is how we depict police officers in Britain. I don't feel like I know if it's different anywhere else. My instinct tells me that police officers in America and most other countries are generally, and I emphasize generally, depicted as like a little bit cooler and more slick than that. But in England, we really like depicting our police officers as like chubby, jolly, middle-aged men. Which is funny because they are still pigs. Pokemon Sword and Shield are bad JRPGs, but they are excellent BRPGs. That's British role-playing game, and I for one find myself delighted at the many insightful references to the British Isles that can be found in these games. The art director and Pokemon designer for these games was James Turner, himself a Brit, and it shows because Sword and Shield really do feel like games made by a team who immersed themselves in British culture and understood its history. I'd be fascinated to hear what other people who have had Pokemon regions inspired by their countries thought of the representations of their culture and landscapes. I'd love to hear from a Spanish person about what they thought of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's interpretation of Spain. I'd love to hear from a Hawaiian person about what they thought of Pokemon Sun and Moon's interpretation of Hawaii. I'd love to hear what a French person... Actually, I don't need to hear from a French person, don't worry about that one. Okay, I've talked more about Pokemon Sword and Shield in the past year than any human being should ever have to. Let's get into something I've literally never spoken about on this channel until now. Fable is a game that I distinctly remember playing growing up and falling off of shortly after leaving the guild because I'd never played a Western RPG before and didn't really know what was going on. If I were giving an award to the most British video game or video game series, Fable would probably take the cake, followed closely by Banjo-Kazooie. Fable was created by Lionhead Studios, a British dev team, and its 2026 reboot taken up by Playground Games, who also make the Forza Horizon series. These games are so fucking British that it's it's almost redundant to count the ways in which they are. Like, there's no chance I'm going to cover everything, and it would be stupid of me to try, so I'm going to go fast. Fable is literally set in a fictional world called Albion, the earliest known name for the island of Britain used by the ancient Romans and Greeks. In a roundabout way, it supposedly comes from derivations of the word white in different languages, possibly in reference to the iconic White Cliffs of Dover, one of the closest parts of England to the shores of France, and thus the rest of continental Europe, and somewhere I have been myself. I even shouted an insult across the English Channel and heard something echo back in French, which I assumed to have been a surrender. Fable opens up in the village of Oakvale, a quintessentially medieval England village, what with its pastoral landscape and thatched roofs. Later on, and even more so in Fables 2 and 3, you'll find major settlements dotted with half-timbered or timber-framed buildings, the likes of which old England was so well known for. None of the stuff I've just mentioned was exclusive to England, mind you. Timber framing especially was a building technique used all throughout Western Europe, but it's the combination of these things on top of, like, being made by English people and everyone having English accents that I think makes this a no-brainer. I mean, the opening village is called Oakvale, and the national tree of England is the oak tree. Yes, countries have national trees now too. We have national flowers, national trees, national dishes, national animals. As a matter of fact, I'm considering this section of the script a reminder to have a rant about national animals at the end of this video. Stick around for that. As the Fable series progressed, its old high fantasy sensibilities would slowly morph into more steampunk sensibilities, and the environments and technology present in the games would go on to reflect, you guessed it, the Industrial Revolution. There it is again. Fable 3, a game that hinges on you becoming king and deciding how you'll manage and tax the country, opens with a cinematic that hits basically every steampunk visual trope you can imagine. Billowing black smoke, gears and production lines galore. In Fable 3, we even get our first look at a militia that resembles the real-life Royal Guards, with their red outfits and tall black hats that are a few meters of height and pounds of fur away from being the iconic bearskin hats. The royal family are even the villain of this game. Your brother is too, but only for a bit. I would argue that the element of Fable that most encapsulates its incorrigible Britishness, though, is its humour. With its expression system, Fable allows you to get as slapstickishly crude as the most juvenile pantomime with basically any NPC, and with often vulgar consequences for failure. I love British humour. I think we're some of the funniest people in the world, but I will say that Fable is more representative of a kind of British humour that's mostly of a bygone era, passé by today's standards. Authentic, yes, but even as someone who loves slapstick, not my favourite flavour of British humour. Good things about British culture, clock towers, rock music. Bad things about British culture, pantomime. Colonialism. Similarly, a lot of Fable's humour and character could be owed to British comedy troupe Monty Python, whose works are often cited as an influence on the series, which I think is plain to see. I cannot, in 2025, find high quality footage of every reference and Easter egg pertaining to Monty Python in the Fable games, but a quick Google shows that Fable 3 in particular has a metric ton of them. Enemies in Fable 3 will say it's just a flesh wound when badly damaged, an obvious reference to the infamous Black Knight. There is a fight with some demonic chickens surrounded by the bones of their enemies, a tip of the hat to the demonic rabbit that shows up at the end of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and if you kill a hob with a specific attack during the arena fight in Reaver's mansion, the announcer will say that the hob is dead, he is deceased. That hob is passed on, he is no more, he's shuffled off this mortal coil, which the internet is telling me is a reference to the Dead Parrot skit, but that's not an exact quote as far as I'm aware. I don't know if I'm missing something. Monty Python isn't really my specialty, but the point remains. There are so many references, and frankly so many instances of Fable being the most British video game series yet conceived that we'll be here all day if we keep going, so let's get out here. In 2025, a new challenger took to the stage, brown Bess musket in hand, Tesco meal deal sandwich in the other, ready to challenge Fable for its title as the most British video game ever made. This game was called Atomfall, set in an alternate universe 1960s England where the disastrous fire at the Windscale nuclear facility in 1957, often cited as the closest Britain came to experiencing its own Chernobyl incident, spread further and reduced much of northwestern England into a radioactive quarantine zone. Yes, this is a game ostensibly set in northern England, in the county of Cumbria to be exact, near the scenic Lake District, yet another of our UNESCO World Heritage sites. It is such a rare treat to get a game set in northern England, and it's no surprise that it took an English team like the folks over at Rebellion Developments to make it happen. And before I move on with this section, I also want to give a quick shout out to Thank Goodness You're Here, an indie game that to my great shame I have still not played, set not literally in Yorkshire, but in a cartoonish simulacrum of the creator's childhood town of Barnsley, situated in Yorkshire. I will get to this one day, I promise. I like everything about the way it looks. Atomfall, while set in wider northwestern England, does not appear to feature many, if any, real-life English locations as its focal areas, though the central village of Wyndham is of particular interest. A quick Google tells me that there is a Wyndham village in Wales, though I think it's more likely, given Atomfall's sci-fi sensibilities and poison-spitting plant enemies, that this village is named after John Wyndham, revered English sci-fi author most known for the post-apocalyptic 1951 novel Day of the Triffids, in which people start getting wiped out by a species of aggressive plant. In the story of Atomfall, the real-life Windscale nuclear facility is effectively created to cover up the discovery of a mysterious meteorite dubbed Oberon. And as the story progresses, it's made clearer that Oberon is a kind of force of nature, urging those exposed to it to reject technology and return to our natural state of being. The naming of Oberon is conspicuous and constitutes, if you can believe it, our first certified Shakespeare reference of this video. For Shakespeare, for those of you who may have somehow forgotten, was an English writer, and Oberon is the name of a character in one of his most famous plays, A Midsummer Night's Dream. More specifically, Oberon is the king of the Fae and a powerful spirit of nature. There are even suggestions in the game that Oberon the meteorite fell to England during Shakespeare's time, strengthening this connection. If there's a British IP that any single British person throughout all of history ever looked at a piece of merchandise for in a shop, Atomfall has a reference to it. There are so many references and nods to British media and pop culture in this game that Eurogamer has 3 videos dedicated to them, so if you're looking for a comprehensive list, I'd check those out, but here's 2 of my favourites. Out in the Casterfell Woods area can be found a Wicker Man, a great effigy standing on high with a gruesome crucified body in it alongside a wicker basket. Crucially, no American accents and no bees to be found, so I think we can safely assume this a reference to British author and director Robin Hardy's 1973 folk horror film The Wicker Man, based on British author David Pinner's 1967 novel Ritual, and not the 2006 Neil LaBute directed film The Wicker Man, featuring American screamy meme man Nicolas Cage. The 1973 film is credited with bringing the concept of The Wicker Man into the zeitgeist. Such a cultural icon is it here in the UK that we literally have a roller coaster based on it at our most popular theme park in Alton Towers. Look at this thing. It's fucking awesome. The first roller coaster in the world to combine wood and fire. God, we are so horny for roller coaster records over here. Fun British fact, between the years of 2005 and 2010, we had literally the greatest TV show in the world. It was called Doctor Who, which I literally cannot believe I've never found a way to talk about on this channel before. I'm such a fucking freak about Doctor Who, guys. I truly believe that at its height, it was as good as Game of Thrones at its height. No one asked, but my favourite episodes are Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. But Atomfall makes sure to give Doctor Who its flowers with a very neat little reference wherein you can find the TARDIS, the Doctor's time machine, which appears as just a slightly altered blue British police box within a heavily guarded area of the game's map. Though you may spot the TARDIS from afar, getting closer won't only get you riddled with bullets, but it'll also get the TARDIS to peace out as it plays the iconic whirring sound and disappears practically as soon as you take your eyes off it within a certain distance. very nicely done. Atomfall is genuinely bursting at the seams with stuff like this. There's even a more overt reference to the Monty Python Dead Parrot sketch. The depiction of 1960s northern England here, what with its hilly terrain, stone cottages and authentic signage, is a real sight for sore eyes. Though not having been to many small villages in the county of Cumbria, I can't say whether the red phone boxes would actually have been there in the 60s, or if this is just put there to be like an icon of England. You know, a little something to slap on the key art and let everyone know where it's set. Atomfall is made with a ton of love for the things that make our country cool, warts and all, and I for one really appreciate seeing a video game made that represents so many different aspects of our culture, especially when none of them are Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling, get that black mold cleaned out of your hateful little brain. Now before I get out here, let me talk to you about national animals, okay? So England's national animal is the lion, right? You know who else's national animal is the lion? Everyone. In Europe alone, we've got Belgium, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, the Netherlands. Guys, the lion has not been native to Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. Okay? None of us have lions. Now, yes, Scotland's national animal is the unicorn and Wales is the dragon, but those are funny. They're unique. They give those places character. We can't all just be lions. So why did England pick the lion? Well, it's because we were a huge, powerful empire and we thought it was cool, that it best represented our bravery and power. Basically, we were aura farming. Now there's statues of them all over the country. They're on our football shirts, on our royal coat of arms. But it's time to get real. We are a dying empire. We've got potholes in the road and Coldplay in the charts. Here is my hot take that no one asked for. England's national animal should be the European badger. If you don't know, England is kind of weird in that we have no apex predators. Bears and wolves and lynx used to make their homes here in ages long past, but because we have a huge hunting culture to satisfy the childish whims of posh dickheads, we hunted those animals all off the island ages ago. And because we are an island nation, it's not like wolves or lynx can just come wandering in again from France or Belgium. So our apex predator, with no exaggeration, is kind of the badger. They're found all throughout Europe, but most commonly here, specifically in southern England. And think about it, it looks elegant, refined, and even quaint on the outside, but it is actually a vicious monster. It's perfect. Don't get it twisted, these things are dangerous. These sweet looking little guys will fuck your whole life up, and really, I think that's the perfect representation of our stupid little section of Normal Island. I am Fudj. This has been Depictions of Britain in video games. Make the European badger the national animal of England. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Hello. Before you go, if I may have your ear for a moment to talk to you about Patreon. It wasn't long ago that I had a video in which I promoted my Patreon that hit nearly 300,000 views. Despite that number, and promoting my Patreon in basically every other video I make, I've seen little to no movement. I take a lot of pride in that everything I do on this channel is very high effort. I don't do stream highlights. I've done one tier list video in the 5-year history of this channel. I don't do reaction videos or anything else like that just for the sake of having something to put up once a week or more often. But realistically, I would probably make a lot more ad money if I pivoted to this style. My current rhythm of uploading one big high effort video every month or two is only really sustainable nowadays through support on Patreon, and at the moment I'm struggling a bit in that regard. At the moment you can sign up to patreon.com/nocturnalfudge for as little as $2 a month, or you can go for the higher tier option to get your name in the end credits. And I'm open to suggestions on what else I can do if neither that or early video access really entices you. Just know that I really do not like the idea of a Patreon exclusive Discord. I kind of hate the idea of any kind of social group formed around me in any way. I used to write big exclusive reviews and more serious straight-laced opinion pieces on various games on my Patreon that I thought were really good and I was really proud of, but practically every time I uploaded them I would in fact lose patrons, so I felt pretty discouraged from continuing those. Either way, I know times are tough and this is a bad time for everyone. Anything anything you can give at all would be greatly appreciated, but I totally understand that you may not be in a position to do so, or just may not feel like it. It's your life, it's totally up to you. I am just increasingly having trouble justifying making videos with my Patreon numbers the way they are at the moment, and may have to consider my future if things don't look up soon. This is no one's fault, it is the state of the world and the economy right now. I kind of hate that I even have to ask like this at a time like this and feel like a bit of a charity case, but unfortunately, it do just be like that. Thank you so much should you choose to give anything at all to patreon.com/nocturnalfudge for any period of time. And on that note, thank you to my high tier patrons: Good Chicken, Christopher Monk, Flashing Fire, Tale of the Toaster, Justin Duncan Mills, Garm, Super, Cactus, Boomer Callus, Salad Dinner, Rylander, T.O.J. Davis, Martint, Mackerel Bean, Mark Tanner, Cyberpunk Chimney, Kareem Najar, The Return of BBF69, Uma, Buttered Legs, Justin, Yo Adrian, Zooms, and Sticky Spin. Thank you so much again, guys. I really can't overstate how much I appreciate it, and I'll see you all again soon.